All right, we have a work session tonight with the Library Board of Trustees regarding the construction renovation of a new library. So I'm going to call the work session to order. First of all, I apologize, we were a little bit late. We had performance reviews of two of our judges before this, which we're in the side room over there for. So work session is a little different than a traditional meeting, so I just wanted to run through that with everybody. At our work session, we kind of work through the issues. Sometimes we have it with another entity in town, like the Board of Trustees or with the school committee. Sometimes we have it on a particular issue. There's no voting at a work session. It's really to work through what the issues are, and some of you I know have attended work sessions in the past. There's no formal period of public comment either during a work session. We did, because of the interest in this is being televised, so but it is not being televised live, so it'll be seen on video afterwards, and I'll have Terry, the dates of that rebroadcast will make sure we get out to people in town. So I called for this work session because I felt we were kind of at an impasse on the library issue, so I wanted to see what the Board of Trustees, in light of all the events that have taken place in the last couple of years, and in light of, and also the council, what the thought processes were of coming to a way to kind of resolve that impasse. So right now I'm going to really open it up to the members of the Board of Trustees and to the council. So I'll first go to Lori, and if she wants to talk about her.
Council President.
Or Patrick, yeah.
If I may. So usually, my last 4 years, usually the work sessions, there's usually a question and answer at the end with the public. I said usually, in the work sessions that I have attended, that there's a question and answer period for the public. Is that going to transpire tonight?
I think if we have time. So let's get through this portion first, because again, the work session is about if we can come to some kind of agreement. So, and we've had the budget work sessions, and we often have public comment at the end. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Lori Kelly, who's the head of the Board of Trustees of the library, and thank you for the Board of Trustees for being here.
There was a request that we all identify everyone.
Sure.
So if we could start with that.
Go ahead. Let's do that.
For us? Sure. Jesse Pugh.
Patrick Murray.
Matt Mannix. And I'm also going to encourage everybody to speak into the microphone since it is being televised. Okay.
Jill Lawler.
Richard Lima.
Karen Shabshelowitz.
Dan Sullivan. Nancy McKenna.
Patty Arkwright, Library Director.
Lori Kelly.
Gail Shields.
Ellen Koima.
Jim Manny, Town Manager.
All right, so we'll start with that. So tonight the Library Board has prepared a hopefully short and overview of the work that's been done so far, and what we see is our our need to really step it up and move forward right now, and the reasons why. So not to be tedious, but because this has gone on for so long and a lot of questions keep getting asked, we just thought we'd do a short overview. We're looking for the overview now. And this is not it. Ah, there we go. All right, so we can move on to the next page. So the library board started this, and it was a previous library board, but some of us are still around, we had a lack of physical space and ADA compliance in our current building. So in 2008, we actually hired a architecture firm from Wakefield Columbia Architects to talk about raising the second floor. It was phenomenally expensive just to get 3,000 to 4,000 square feet for a programming room. It was up around $4 million. So at that point, the board thought for $4 million, we're on our way to having a whole new library. We started meeting with OLIS because they have a very generous grant and aid program that reimburses library projects. We went to the council at that point to ask for a bond, and we were given $50,000 in capital improvements to pursue studies for a new library. 2011, we hired the library consultant. She wrote a needs assessment report. The library consultant's an expert in library construction and library use. So she looked at all of the Narragansett documentation, comprehensive plan, demographics, census stuff to come up with what we need in this particular town. Again, 2013, we continued to search the entire town, top to bottom, for suitable library sites. And in 2014, we actually asked the council again for a bond for the library project. The council went forward with the football field and the police bonds and told us to come back in the next cycle, which would be 2016. We can go to another page. Thank you. So 2015, we had a workshop very much like this one where we went over a whole bunch of viable sites. We vetted, I think, close to 10 sites in town, but we only really ran serious numbers on 4 sites. At the end of the public workshop, this was September, October 2015, the council chose to stay in the pier. And they said, you know, continue to work on the Belmont and examine our current site for an addition that would give us the space, but they were very adamant, don't close, because one of the options would be to build a whole new building on that site. In 2016, we did get the $5.8 million approved for the bond. And then in 2017, we had the first of 2 commercial appraisals for the deal in the Belmont building as negotiations continued. The town council did reject that first deal, which was a condominium deal. We worked out a better deal, which is the current deal that we have purchased in the building. And there was a second Andolfo appraisal in January of 2018, which was the 2.676. So we're all caught up now. We bought the building in October of last year for 2.8. So now we're going to move on to funding. Again, you know, all of this is just very rudimentary, but we did approve $5.8 million in bonds, and the state program, which is grant and aid under OLIS, reimburses up to 50% of a project. So we've always looked at a conservative figure. If it's a $5.8 million bond and we get 40%, that would be $2.3 million. And that's a flow through from the state to the town. So the town issues $5.8 million, but we're really only paying back the 3.5 that the state is not covering. That covers the, for 19 years. That covers the interest on the bonds. It covers the cost of issuing the 40% of the bonds. And several, I know Laura Kenyon, also Jim Manny, previously on other presentations have said that 3.5 is basically 8 cents on the dollar, and the cost to the taxpayer on an average $400,000 house would be about $33 a year in real terms. So these are numbers that have been presented before. If 3.5 is still a lot for the town to do, we want to remind the town that when we leave our current building, that building could be sold. It is a corner lot with parking. I know people have really been clamoring for a smaller groceries in the area, but that is an asset for the town. The town doesn't, that has nothing to do with us. We don't have to sell it. But again, that asset is now created of, our commercial appraisal said $1.3 million for our current building. So again, we're just being conservative of creating the $1 million asset. Now we're going on to fundraising. Again, we have Dan Barry, our fundraiser, here tonight, so I'm just going to do just a quick movement over that, and then I'm sure you'll have more specific questions for him. There's two types of fundraising that we are pursuing, and that is, one is foundations and grants. We have been told that there are certain things that the foundations need to see. That is an architectural floor plan. We do not have that because we don't have an architect yet. And they need to see the commitment that this project is going forward, which, again, we're kind of stalemated here. They don't see that. And there are some of these big foundation grant places have specific timelines. There's one coming up in April. If we cannot get an architectural plan and file in April, we wait for another year. And these are six-figure possible grants that, you know, love libraries, like the project, but we cannot afford to miss that deadline. On the private side, you know, private donations from people who live in town, they also wish to see floor plans. They also wish to see a commitment that it's going forward, and there are naming opportunities for various, you know, clock towers or rooms or elevators. So we do need to move forward on that front as well. The next slide is really on our timing, because I know there's some resistance. We just bought the building. We have to have a lot of meetings, get a lot of information, which, of course, we applaud you for. But we're really running up against a time problem now. So if we issue the RFP tonight, it's easily 4 to 6 weeks before we can review the responses and actually award a winning bid, and at that point we will have an architect. So if it goes out January 22nd, we're looking somewhere around March 5th. The architect has 90 days for the preliminary plan, and I have to caution you, that's the first plan, because the architect is going to have design charrettes, which are a lot of information from the staff, the patrons, and the way that the library functions in Narragansett. We have a very highly educated population. They use the library in ways that are different from the way they use the library in Warwick or Cranston. So this is a lot of back and forth from the preliminary design, which we estimate could be another 90 days. When we all agree on that input, that final plan, then we need to get a cost estimation from a professional cost estimator. OLIS insists on that. Obviously, we want to know what it's going to cost, whether we're within budget or not, and that's another 2 to 4 weeks. So now we're looking at September 15th. We take our architectural plan, we take our cost estimate, we take our needs assessment, which Patience Jackson, our library consultant, drew up in 2016, and we give all that information to the state, and they take 60 to 90 days to comment on our plan, to give us advice if in case we put the bathrooms in a place that's not appropriate, something like that, and then give us a hard number as to what they're willing to reimburse. But that's the time frame. Now you can see we're into December. We can go forward. So the other thing to mention is, the bond issuance. We have approval for $5.8 million. The way that the building was purchased was they took $2.8 out of the reserves, hoping to issue the bonds to repay back the town reserves. So again, the clock for issuing that bond started when we purchased the building in October. So we really must issue that $2.8 million by January 2020, because the bond council needs to market and sell the bonds as well, or we cannot use those bonds to purchase the 2.8 or to repay the 2.8 million into the town's coffers, which would seem to be a tax burden on the town that we're really not thinking about. The other thing to remember is the bond council will not issue any of the bonds without a fully funded project. How do we know the project is fully funded? We have to have an architect, and we have to have a professional cost estimate. So since 2016, interest rates have risen, construction costs have risen, tariffs have doubled on some of the material costs. Everything has gotten worse for us. The current library is open under waivers. We have filed waivers with the state of Rhode Island for 3 years. That means we're not meeting the standards set by the state. And again, OLIS will work with us and give us waivers if they see we're moving forward on our project. The most dire thing that could happen is the library could be closed. And let's be clear, if the library was closed because of failure to meet standards or to make any progress on that, then that means the people in Narragansett cannot use any library in the state, because the state mandates each town support a library, and they have certain standards. They have standards, but they also give us money to meet those standards. So it's not really a bad system. Now, we just had a quick overview. The 10 top reasons that we feel we should go forward. Our current building is inefficient to heat and maintain. We use extra staff because of so many blind spots in the building. The second floor has no legal access. We have inadequate parking of 15 spots, a very small programming room. The children's room is too small. 15 children, or 15 people, so adults and children, can only be in the children's room at one time. And there's no bathrooms, which makes it fairly unsafe. No legal fire exits from the meeting rooms, multiple ADA violations. The number 2 reason, the state of Rhode Island will reimburse up to 50% of any program. And the number 1 reason that we feel we should move forward with this is that 67% of Narragansett voted for this project. And just one small last thought is that Narragansett is one of, which I'm not sure it's 3 towns, but one of very few towns that have never claimed our share of the state grant and aid. And what that means as a Narragansett taxpayer, which I am, I built the library in Tiverton, and I built the library in Barrington and Cranston, because my tax dollars were used to build beautiful libraries everywhere in the state. Thank you.
So thank you, Lori. I know some people were familiar with some parts of that and not all of it. I wanted to then see other council members and other members of the Board of Trustees, what their thought process was. You know, if Patrick and Jill, I know, have been living with it longer, so I was going to maybe go to them first and go out from there. So you both have, the 3 of us have been dealing with it the last few years. So,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Maybe it might be a good time. Might be a good time for Dan to step in and explain his fundraising expertise, if that's okay. We're there to get the.
Dan, right here. Dan. Oh, no, that's fine, yeah. And we're operating in our budget, Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, off of a $7 million total number for this, is that correct?
Yes, 7.2 million.
7.2 million, that was from the budget of this year. That's the number we're operating off of right now.
We're going under that assumption as the best estimate we could get it to this point.
Thank you to the town council and the board for moving us forward. My role has been to look at the community for a fundraising source and also foundations and corporations. One thing that I was asked to do a long time ago and thought it would be good for the public to know is the clients that I've been involved in South County and the latest library that I was involved in. Tiverton Library was my project. We raised $3.5 million on a $2.5 million goal. The other statements that we have here is everything has reached goal. That's the point I wanted to share, is that I've had experience for over 45 years in the fundraising field. We're going to be successful. Get the next slide, please. Three key components to this that is important for the council and the board of directors to know. All funds raised will be for the gap need, meaning whatever the architect finds out how much more it's going to be than the 5.8, we do not want the town to be responsible for that. we want to take care of that obligation, and we're going to do that by fundraising. And so we're looking at gap needs, but we need to know what that number might be. One very important thing to realize is that donors will not look at giving their money to pay down the bond. They're taxpayers. They know they've already done the tax portion. They're doing something over and above what they already had voted on and supported. So people will not be giving money to reduce the bond, and if we go in that direction, most likely folks will want their money back. The public fundraising goal we raised, I used based on a good interview that Matt had last week on Channel 12, I think it was. The minimum was 1.3 million that he thought we might need, so that's what I used in this context. So we're looking at to raise 1.2, 1.3 million to make it happen. Already we received some funds. We haven't been able to get commitments from a lot of folks. I've talked to a lot of individuals, but people are waiting to see what movement we have, how we're going forward. Folks are energized to support the library. I have 4 gifts to report, though. We have one anonymous donor who has pledged $500,000 to this $1.3 million goal. We have one family gift of $50,000, another family gift of $24,000, and a corporate gift of $40,000. These are the only 4 people I've spoken to make a definitive decision about their giving. Many others are being recruited for our honorary leadership committee. Our chair for the campaign is Jim and Jennifer Bennett. Our honorary chair is Terry Murray. And we have a group of 10 other families that are on board, and we've got another 8 that we're targeting, and we hope we'll get them on board within 3 to 4 weeks. Problem is that they're down in Florida, and the board of directors doesn't want to send me down there, which I don't understand. But we're making fantastic fundraising progress at this early stage, and we really couldn't get commitments until you signed the document, which was in October. So from the fundraising side, we're going to raise the 1.3 and much more. Any questions?
So you don't see any problem raising 1.3, 1.4? I was kicking around 1.4, but
initially, the first step that I had, and every fundraiser in the country does, is a feasibility study on whether or not the town cares about the program. Fundraising is an easy business, finding out who cares about the project. In this case, the town cared about the project, and I found that there was $1.2 to $1.7 million that we could set as a goal to make it happen. And already we're at 47%.
excellent.
I have a question for you, Dan. How was the process in terms of the referendum passing in Narragansett? How was that process compared to Tiverton? Was that an easier process in Narragansett to get approval from the voters, or was it?
In Tiverton, they did it a different way, where they raised the money first and used that as the impetus for the town to come on board and support the bond. What we did was we went out and asked the community to support the bond. In both cases, in Tiverton and here, the towns committed and supported the bond. We supported it with a higher percentage than Tiverton did. Tiverton was in the high 50s, but they still came through, and they raised $3.5 million. We're going to be fine at raising 1.2 to 1.7 for sure.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Yes, make sure everybody speaks into the microphones. I know this is a different format for us. I know that Dan did, but yes, thank you. We want to make sure everyone speaks into the microphone. We all don't have our own. So Patrick and Jill, I was just going to see what you both, since you've have more experience. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a little presentation I would like to go over. It's something we discussed last year, pretty much the same numbers. So, let me see. That one right there. Yes, sir. You don't have a pointer on you, do you? Yeah. Okay, well, that's us. Go to the next slide. Okay, the total cost of this whole project. And these are numbers that have been out there for over a year. 10.5. Reimbursement, 3.3. That's from OLIS. Fundraising, minimum 1.2 in this slide. Adjusted cost, over a 20-year cost, is $7.2 million. Next slide, please. All right, as a breakdown for the homeowner, again, we've been over these numbers, and they haven't changed, even though we did update the scoring through the engineering department 2 weeks ago. These numbers are still solid. It's 7.2 cost over 20 years. The yearly cost, average home of $408,000, costs $660 per year, or I mean over 20 years, or $33 a year, 8 cents per thousand on your assessment. So whatever your current town assessment is times 8 cents, that's what you're on the hook for that year. Next. Okay. We have an authorized bond from 2016 election. Fundraising. That fundraising, I go back and forth from 1.1, I mean 1.2, 1.4. Total funding is about $7 million. So, next slide. Okay. Now, there been some talk that we may, I put this little one together here, that we may defund the bond instead of, or the stacked all the way to the left there. It says 5.8 million. Now, and the top, the green is our standard 1.2, 1.4 that the town's on the hook to fundraise. Now, if we give 4 million, which is the second chart in from the left, we still have the 1.4 we need to raise. Then we'd have to raise an additional 1.8, and so forth to the. If you move to the right, if we get a 3 million of that bond, plus with a 1.4, we'd have to raise yet another 2 million. So as you can see, defunding or lack of funding for that complete 5.8 puts us in a difficult position. Next, please. Okay, this is a rudimentary makeup of the library, and we basically got 18,500 square feet. Total cost of $7.2 million. If you look to the number all the way to the right, we got 4 million on the top. If we defund the bond and we only get 4 million of that bond money, that will only go towards 55% of the build out and the purchase. Because remember, this is the purchase and the build out that's paying, that bond money is paying for. So it's, again, 3 million would only be able to build out 42% of that building, and then 2 million again would be down to 28%. So we'd probably have to open up a takeout window at that point. So next, please. The liquor store. I threw this in here. All this scoring over the last year didn't include the liquor store. I'm not including the liquor store. We have that lease currently for $60,000. It pays for the current CAM charges of $38,000 a year, and we're netting $22,000. We paid $400,000 for that parcel or portion of that building, and the reason we had to buy the condo is because you couldn't carve out a lot with and run a property line through the building. So we had to buy the whole building. So at $400,000, you're netting 22. These are rough, rudimentary numbers. You basically got a capitalization rate of about 5%. So the CAM is being paid by the liquor store and then some. Next, please. Right, here's another thing that people keep asking me. Is the library in a flood zone? Okay, now I threw this in here because I had several people ask me this week, why are we building a library in a flood zone? Okay, as you can see, the orange area is Zone X, which Zone X is the least of our flood zones. I mean, it's also known as the 500-year flood zone. Every year, you have a 0.2% chance of a flood. But if anybody's been around as long as I have, you know that the whole pier urban renewal project brought in fill and raised the elevation of that whole area. I think it was like 12 to 16 feet. So certainly the town safety building's in the flood zone, but we're actually out of the flood zone. That circle around there, that gray area, that's actually a 14-foot, AE 14-foot floodplain. So just to dispel that rumor, we're surrounded, but we're up on that hill there. So now for me, I think this is an opportunity to move the pier forward. I think we can take the old pier. I've reached out to several local businesses, and they have interest in leasing the old library. I believe we can carve it up into 3,000 square foot units for a total of 9,000 square feet. Currently, market demands are 20,000 per square foot, and that's very generous. And that would gross about 180 a year. And you take out some maintenance and basic, principles of management. I think we could net about 125 and 135 per year, and that could go to offset the new purchase and build out of the bond market of the Belmont building. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I know the council members have also spent some time talking to the bond counsel and to OLIS, so I'm going to turn it over to Jill now in terms of, since she, as I said, she and Patrick have been working on this and dealing with this project the last 2 years. So, Jill?
Okay, thank you very much, and also thank you to Karen Meller, who is, when you hear OLIS, she is actually the person that we met with, so thank you for taking the time to come all the way down here to Narragansett. Well, the microphone's on. I'll just have to yell into it a little louder.
Use this one. Here, use this one.
I'll just talk louder. Can you hear me now? No? Take another mic. Oh.
That's okay.
That's okay, we got this one. There you go. So we did take the opportunity, as mentioned at one of the meetings in December, we wanted to go meet with Karen at OLIS, and myself, Rick Lima, Patty, Lori Kelly, Jim Manny, and Laura Kenyon, our finance director, did take that opportunity. We asked a series of questions, and a lot of the information is new information, so I wanted to share it with you because it certainly is some things to think about as far as we talk about being fiscally responsible, some things to understand. First, as far as the size of the library, I know I believed that we were required to have the library size be the 24,000 square feet based on population for the town. So this was the first question that we asked Karen, is there some type of a formula that would require Narragansett, because of our population, that in the report from the consultant included the URI population as well as our summer population, coming up to the size of the 24,000. And the answer, and Karen's here and can I'm sure answer any of the questions for you tonight, was no, that there is no requirement from OLIS that dictates the size of a town population to be the square footage for the library. So we asked, okay, where did that come from? And it was from the Board of Trustees and the consultant that they had hired. They had done a needs assessment, which we've heard about tonight, that talked about what they believed the need of the town would be. So that made me start to understand a little bit more as we've learned more about the project. A lot of the needs that we're seeing are needs that I believe are being duplicated by our community center. We have a senior center. We have a wonderful senior center director in Karen Flint. She does fantastic jobs. We have the ability for programs over there. So in looking at this, as this program has morphed a little bit from being a library to being more of a place to have movies, a place to have lectures, a place to have children's events. Those are all great things to have, but I don't want to be able to have to duplicate efforts with current sites. It doesn't seem reasonable for Narragansett. So that's number one as far as the size. The second question I asked Karen was about any types of overages. So what we've learned tonight from Lori is very true, that once an RFP is brought to OLIS will take a look at it and will be able to determine the value that we'll get back, which can range anywhere between 30 to 50%. So they'll take a look at it at that RFP, as soon as we hand the RFP to them. So I asked, being in real estate and seeing development happen all the time, what would happen if we were into a project and we all of a sudden found something that we were unaware of, a $400,000 item, a $100,000 item? What would happen then? And the response back from Karen was, we could not go back to OLIS and say, we just found this. We just found out that it's going to be $500,000 more. We're unaware of it. Can we be reimbursed? And the answer to that was no, that the reimbursement is a one-time reimbursement from when we initially apply. So those were two things that really concerned me from the meeting. The third thing is our current library is about 9,000 square feet, give or take. And the town is giving funding $840,000 a year to the library. So we spoke a little bit more about the fact that we would be doubling the size of the library, which would be doubling the size of anything that operates in a library, salaries, heating, electric, all of those things. So we asked then, well, what would happen as far as the difference between doubling the size? I mean, certainly it's not going to go up double, 840,000, but certainly there will be a number it goes up. And the response we received back was the town would need to guarantee that the town would pay that difference. So, those three things were a little bit concerning as far as just, number one, we didn't need to have as large of a library as we bought. And as far as the OLIS coverage, that it's a one-time as soon as we show it, and then also to taking a look at any type of any additions for operations and salaries going forward as we explore out. We also took the opportunity to meet with Bond, as I know Jesse Pugh did, and myself, Matt, and Rick as well, with our town manager and our town finance director. And the one thing that he was stressing is that he would not issue a bond, and I know Laura and I know Matt both said that they would not sign for the bond if we did not have the money in the bank. So I am so thrilled to see that you have so many people that are willing to donate. However, it's my understanding that unless there is actually money in the bank, they did make the exemption of either a Rhode Island Foundation or a Champlain Foundation, that certainly if they were pledging grant money from those, that they would consider it that was fact, but any individual would actually need to be in the bank. So he wouldn't be able to issue the bond until that time. I hear what you're saying as far as 67.9% voted for. I voted for the bond. I continue to tell everyone I voted for the bond, and I did. However, there are many people that if you ask about the bond, what did you vote for? There's a difference. There's a difference between people who think they voted for existing site versus people who they think voted for a purchase. There's no way for us to know that. The one thing that we do know is that we bought the building, it's ours. And we have a bond for $5.8 million out there. And the town right now is out the 2.8 from our funding for that. I also wanted just to put out the fact, too, that because of the dream that you have, that the needs assessment and the report that's in with our library consultant, that in my belief, the library has really morphed more into a library but a community center. And certainly the town never voted the $5.8 million to turn over a community center to the Library Board of Trustees. So those are some thoughts that I've had. I know that we need to have a new library. We do. We need to have a better library, but I just want to make sure that we're doing it in the most cost-effective manner and most intelligent manner, that we're not boxing out other current buildings we have that are in disrepair that we could be utilizing. And I just think that these are some things that we need to look at, and a lot of this information is new information that we just found out recently.
Of course. So the question was, so the next we're going to go to the members of the Board of Trustees, but I want to fix that. I want to see if we can fix that microphone too. Yeah. But what I'll do now is I'll turn it over to if members of, is it unplugged?
Well, Councilman Mann.
Right, we'll take a break in a little bit to do that, but let me see what the members of the Board of Trustees, what they have come forward. We'll come back around. Okay. Yeah, we'll come back around. So we'll send this over. Ricky, can you give that to Karen, please? All right. No, we're going to go, I'll do the board. Some people,
Jill, I take issue with some of your comments. First of all, I'm vice president of the seniors, and I spend a lot of time over at the senior activities. It's very well utilized in that building, and the things aren't interchangeable and aren't reduplicating what is over at the senior center. Plus, we have a growing number of senior population, and there are special expertise that our librarians have concerning the use of technology, and there's special factors that we're able to get things like the movies. You can't just bring them over to the senior center and show them over there. Plus, there isn't the room over there. So if it's being utilized and it's not open on weekends or in the evenings, and there's a need for all the activities that are already over there and expanding programs. So with all due respect, I find it not an accurate analysis of the availability of the rooms at the community center versus the library. And we also have an aging population that was shown by the last 10-year comprehensive plan. And we use the library for a lot of different age groups and a lot of different activities, and it's not duplicated. Thank you.
Do other members from the board want to weigh in? Go ahead, or Karen. Do like Karen to me. So Karen, why don't you come up to the microphone Dan came to? If that, unless you want to sit here, it's fine. Whatever.
Good, how are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I respect and admire what the trustees are doing, the council are doing in terms of trying to bring a new library to the residents of Narragansett, and I think it's a well-deserved turn. I know the voters voted in favor of this, and I know that there's a need to improve the library services here in town. I also appreciate meeting. I've met with a number of you on different occasions, whether it's down here in the town of Narragansett, with the town manager, the finance department, and thank you, Jill and Rick, for coming up to see me in December. I know we covered a lot of ground in that meeting, and I just wanted to clarify a few points that we did discuss that have been brought up today. The first is about the size of the library and the requirement of the square footage. And absolutely, we do not have a requirement for how large a library in the state needs to be. We leave that as a local decision. The local decision is based on the strategic plan that the library develops in terms of reviewing the needs of the community, getting feedback from the community, and analyzing the use of services and the use of the building at the library. So we require that the library in the town meets the needs of the strategic plan. What I've seen in the building program, which I think you've all had access to, and that Lori discussed when she did her presentation, is the fact that the meeting room can't accommodate the number of people who want to attend programs at the library. The children's room is woefully inadequate in terms of the size to serve the young people of Narragansett, which of course is one of our key missions here, is providing learning resources and that early literacy where kids often learn how to read, going to story times at the library. So it's looking at the whole group of services that the library provides to everyone from, as we sometimes say, from birth to earth, from the young people to the senior citizens. So providing services for the entire population of the town. So based on the program that the building consultant put together, that is how the library derived the square footage. And when we look at a construction application, we look to make sure that they've done due diligence, research the town, research the services they need to provide to come up with a square footage for the library. So we support the number that they developed because it's based on community need. And if we saw community need documented, yet a building that's perhaps 9,000 square feet, we would not sign on to reimbursing a project like that. Again, the needs, as Lori said, they're different in every town in the state. So we leave it to the local board of trustees and the local library to determine how large a library they need. and we look for the evidence that supports their cause in their application for state reimbursement. I also wanted to clarify on the reimbursement. In terms of when OLIS signs off on reimbursement, we will help, as we've been involved since, I believe, 2009, coming down to the library, meeting with the Board of Trustees and the consultants that have been brought in. We've met with them, we've explained the program to them, but one of the key factors of the program is we work with the library throughout the process. It's not a competitive grant. Libraries can submit an application for construction reimbursement funding at any time, and we do give priority to communities that have not received a grant in the 54 years that the program has been in existence. So in terms of when we sign off on reimbursement, so there's a preliminary letter of intent which we've received from the Library Board of Trustees outlining what they intend to do, and we have not received an application yet because we suggest people submit an application when they have a cost on what the building should be based on some preliminary architectural drawings. So we will work with the library throughout the process, looking at the schematic drawings, providing feedback, but we won't sign a construction reimbursement agreement until we see the final plans for the library construction, so that you have the construction drawings ready and prepared, you have that professional cost estimate available, so you have a really good idea of what the cost of the building will be. And that includes an engineer going through the building and uncovering, is there asbestos in the building, are there structural issues, so that all these elements in terms of constructing the library have been considered. And hopefully, if you have an architect, an engineer, and a cost estimator that know their profession, know their job, they will come up with a cost that is pretty close to what the cost of the building is going to be, plus a contingency. And we will sign on to a contingency, which is usually around 10% of that cost. So once you have the construction plans all set with the engineering and all the various aspects to that, once you have those improved also by the building inspector in the town, we will look at that, and there will be that cost estimate. And that is the agreement that we will enter with the Library Board of Trustees to reimburse the project. And that also includes making sure that 100% of the funding is in place. So before the state signs off on any agreement to reimburse a construction project, you will have a pretty good number in terms of how much that project's going to cost. And I agree, Jill, as you mentioned, sometimes in real estate, you don't know things until you start knocking walls down. But hopefully with the building, it's not that old a building, and it's basically a box. I have had a walk through the building, so I'm not an engineer. I don't know what could be underneath, but I know the town probably looked at the building before they bought the building. So I just wanted to clarify that when the state signs off on a project, we want to see the money, we want to know how much it costs, so that you have the maximum reimbursement that we can determine at that point in time. So most of the projects we've done, of course, there are change orders on any project that may increase the cost, but the reimbursement comes through what the state has committed to after we've done an audit of the project. We talked about the costs of running the library. Now, one of the other requirements of OLIS's construction reimbursement program is that the town looks at the library that they're constructing and looks at it in terms of how we're going to staff it, how we're going to run it. Now, I've heard earlier that the existing library is not very efficient in terms of its HVAC system. When you have a new building, it will be built up to the current standards of energy savings, and will be more efficient to run than your existing space. The space also, the way it is, it's basically a big box. Anybody who's seen the Belmont Market, big box, that makes supervision easier, and you won't have to have additional staff necessarily to look into nooks and crannies, because everybody will be, with the way the library is built, there will be sight lines incorporated in the design that allows you to make the most efficient use of staff and the most efficient use of space. So we do require that people look at what the costs of running the building will be. Of course, if it's twice as big, it will cost more to run it, but it may be just as efficiently staffed. I know with Tiverton, when they went from a library that was, I believe, about 5,000 square feet to a 24,000 square foot building, they did not have to double their staff. They had to add additional staff, but not not a tremendous number in comparison to what they already have. So the actual costs of running their new library were not that much more than running their old 1920s building that was on 2 floors with staff, because you need staff on each floor. And in terms of duplicative services, again, when the library looks at the needs of the community, they do try to look at what the town offers, and we recommend that they look at what town offers and what services can you complement, what services are unique to the library. In libraries that do not have enough space, sometimes you run programs off-site, and that requires then that a staff member goes off-site or 2 staff members go off-site, thereby reducing the number of staff that could be working in the building. So sometimes using other spaces in town to run library programs is really not a cost-efficient thing to do. It's great to have the services that serve, again, everybody in the community in one space. As the bond council does, we also require that all the money is in place beforehand, so you don't get partly through the project and realize you're running out of space, running out of funds. So we have the same requirements as the bond council. So again, I wanted to clarify a few things, and I know it's a complicated program that we offer in terms of reimbursement, and there's a lot of there's been a lot of discussion, and I know a lot of people are very passionate about this project, and I know we all want to try to work through and prepare or construct the type of library that the town of Narragansett really, really deserves in this fine community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Karen, I know I've heard comments about why do we need to build a bigger library when all you really need is a Kindle or a Nook or some kind of electronics. And I think that the modern library is a lot different from libraries in the past 20 years. Could you give us a tiny overview of what people expect of a library now?
Well, they expect just about everything out of a library at this point in time. At the state, we work a lot with the Department of Labor and Training. We work with the health department. So the libraries are the one place where everybody has access to computers. Now, I know a lot of us are lucky enough to have a computer, 2, 3, or 4, and have an iPad here and our phones and can connect to the internet, but there is a good percentage of people in the state of Rhode Island and in the town of Narragansett, I'm sure, who don't have that access to a computer or access to an internet. And as I mentioned, working with places like the Department of Labor and Training or the health department, if people need to apply for unemployment, if they need to look for a job, if they need to sign up for health insurance under the Affordable Care Act, all these activities have to be intermediated by a computer and the internet. So the library serves as a place where people can come and find information, as they always have, but it's moved a lot from a paper-based technology to technology. And a lot of people who don't have access to computers, of course, won't know how to use them when they go to the library. So the libraries often offer digital literacy training. So that's some of the technology functions that libraries offer. Or they also offer a lot of service to small businesses or people who work at home, single proprietors. There's this trend for human beings are social animals, and some of us may like to work in our houses by ourselves, but a lot of people who do work at home or are basically telecommuting to work, like to come to a space like the library to do that work. So we're also seeing the library being used as that function because of the connectivity with the computers there, whether they're bringing in their own device, but also the socialization and the resources that are provided by the librarians. I talked earlier about literacy programs for youngsters. Homework help is being provided. Libraries are often what we call maker spaces. Now, maker spaces, people think of 3D printers, they think of other technology to create digital resources or digital creation spaces. But the maker concept goes back to the knitting circle, a family, the sewing session, or everybody raises a barn, where people want to get together to create things, whether it's solving a community problem such as the 500-year floodplain, and what do we do in town, or do we need to restore the dune grass to stop that from happening, or saving honeybees, or just problems that face the community. So these maker spaces are not only technology, they're also for very traditional items, and actually knitting is something that a number of libraries are having knitting circles as well as having the technology. So it really, the library is a place for people to come together, for people to learn, for people to get the information they need to proceed with their lives. And it's frankly a nice space to go and just spend some time. You see a lot of time in the libraries I visit, you'll see senior citizens coming in and reading the magazines and the newspapers in the morning. So it's a place that everybody can come where nothing is charged for the services and the library is responsive to the community. So in a nutshell, that's some of the features I see in our libraries around the state right now. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Matt,
Are there any?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So as we mention reimbursement, and reimbursement numbers go around, what do you think that this reimbursement's actually going to be? Is there a number that we can actually put on this?
I can't, that's a good question. I can't put a number on it until we see a number in terms of how much the project will cost. Recently, the construction regulations were changed, and one of the changes was that the reimbursement per square foot for a renovation project, which is what this will be, increased from $175 to $250 per square foot that the state will reimburse. So once we have a number based on some preliminary architectural drawings, then we can provide a number, a cost estimate in terms of what the state will reimburse. And again, that reimbursement covers not only the actual construction costs that we've signed on to, but also the interest in incurring that portion, the state's portion of the reimbursement, and any of the bond costs, the council costs that come as part of that loan. But we will look at the total construction cost in terms of what the project is, whether it's $10 million or the $7.2 million. So we just need to have a number before we can hazard what the guess would be. I would estimate, based on previous projects, that the reimbursement, as was mentioned earlier, might be somewhere around somewhere between 40 and 43% of the project costs. There are certain limits. I mentioned the square foot limit. There's a limit in terms of how much we will reimburse in terms of buying the building and the demolition costs on the building. So there's a few caps on that, but those are all in the regulations.
And moving forward, Karen, with this, if we are going to, but on the other side of the coin is, it's going to be the taxpayers, and we can only raise the taxes 4%. And what council person wants to go the max on a tax rate? You probably won't get elected again, I guarantee you that. So, in looking at all this, the question now is, who are we going to take from? Okay? We still have education in schools. I sat with them today. If you put their program out there, again, the school system's about 30 million. It's about a 2% increase. So that's your number. Multiply the 2 times the 30, and that's what you get for a number. So who are we going to take from? Do you want to lay back on the roads? Do you want to take from the education in the school department? Do you want to take from recreation? And we need to do something with the library. So what do we do? And that's the question I bring forth tonight. What do we do? I'm willing to do it, but how are we going to do it? And how are we going to make it affordable for the taxpayers? We need the best library in this town that the taxpayers can afford, but we also need to do the other projects. Because when you put that all together, as I see numbers that tell me we're losing $9,000 a month, if you want to put a $50 million number out there, which I can very easily put together with everything that needs to be done, it's a lot more than $9,000 a month that these taxpayers we're losing. We've been losing for years. So that's what I'm faced with, and I'm looking at this whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. All right, so everyone's kind of weighed in on their thoughts on where they are. I haven't heard a ton of anybody kind of moving toward the middle on this, but that's okay. which is the hope of the work session. But I think we do have one discrete item that we can have as an output from tonight, which would be the discussion of the liquor store and whether or not that would be part of the library use. So I want to get thoughts on that because I think it's important if the RFP goes out to determine whether or not the liquor store, because the liquor store has a lease till about the middle of 2020. They pay $60,000 a year to the town. It was purchased with $400,000 of taxable bonds, correct? I mean, not bond, yeah.
No, I think that was.
Laura, is that correct? Yes. Yes, it is correct. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to get the thoughts of everyone at the table on that, if we can come to a consensus on at least the liquor store portion of this, because so it will at least have some progress from tonight.
What's your thoughts on the liquor store?
Yeah, taxable bonds, 400,000.
When did they go out?
That was October, the October vote on that, the taxable bonds. And the reason for that is because we can't use non-taxable bonds for the purchase of a liquor store that we get money from.
Can I address Jill's?
I think we can. If we want to debate, we could be here till 1 in the morning.
Well, no.
I want to get a consensus if we can on the Pier liquor store piece of this. I think that's important going forward. So we heard all the different points of view. They're not the same. So there's not a lot of moving to any kind of middle. So I think what the thought process was, there was a lot of discussion about the Pier liquor store. The former council didn't make a decision about that. And I'm sorry, not the former liquor store, the liquor store. And I want to see what the thought process is on that. And I guess I'll start on that. I think that it brings money in for us, the liquor store, so I think we probably should leave it alone, at least for the next 2 years. That would be my thought process, since it brings $60,000 a year in to defray our costs. But
So I guess I'm just confused to comment at all on the liquor store when it sounds like, I mean, Mr. Lima is saying we have other things and we can't go forward with this project. So it seems like the entire thing seems moot. I'm really confused because, yes, there's always going to be other projects in town. This is a project that we can get reimbursement for. So I'm sorry that I can't answer the liquor store because I'm not convinced anyone here is going to go forward with an RFP to go forward with any part of this project. So the liquor store, the building, the parking, the loading dock was initially purchased for a library project. I mean, we can talk about compromises, but if you're not issuing an RFP, I don't know what we're discussing here.
well, the RFP is on the upcoming agenda for the 22nd.
It's been on the agenda several times since November.
And people wanted to do this research, but what happened was it kept getting put on and gobbled up a lot of our town's time in these meetings. So people chose to put that on and where we are. But right now, I'd like to try to get, again, people can debate till, but
well, I mean,
I'd like to get a Pier liquor store.
The RFP is
I'm not assuring you
Monday.
anything. You don't assure me anything.
You're not assuring me anything.
So I'd like to, again, I'd like to see what the council's thoughts are on whether what they wanted, because there was this discussion of the liquor store. If you don't want to get an output on that either, then we'll all just go home because it would be an inconclusive work session.
Matt,
you're out of order. It's not my opinion. I'm just. I am going to close the work session.
No.
If this keeps up. Yes, I am. I'm going to close. I've said very little tonight, actually. Right. So, can she be, I mean, we're going to have to remove you if you act like this. I mean.
All right, so.
I mean.
Okay.
No one should be shouting. No one should be hissing. No one should be shouting. There's a difference of opinion on this. That's what's going on in the community right now, all right? So if you guys tell me, I'm actually going to defer to the council on this. On the liquor store piece of this, I'd like to hear what the thoughts are, so.
Matt, I'll give you my thoughts on the liquor store. I do want to ask you, though, just so we could define it, I guess, like what's coming to the middle for you? So what does that mean? Is that like financially? Is that removing the liquor store from the project? I'm just trying to understand so we're all working on the same.
I was working on some ideas for that, but I heard nothing from anybody on the other side of the fence. So I'm really not like.
No, well, that's what I'm asking now.
Well, I want to hear what is it for you?
For me, maybe. Well, it's hard to do it. You know, changing the amount of the bond is difficult because it has to be a viable project. So when you go to the bond council and you say we're only going to give like $1 million for this project and the building, then the board is not, the fundraising is not going to be able to make up that gap, so it just can't get approved.
Right, so if it's an all or nothing discussion, if there's no, right, so there was opportunity for people to come forward with things, but
I think taking out
didn't hear anything. I heard zero of it.
So like if the liquor store was removed from the project to make it simpler and to also have that revenue coming in.
I want to find out the future of the liquor store. That's what I want to find out.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Right, so why don't you guys tell me what you think about that?
What's your thoughts on
My thought is that would be considered a compromise because it's taking out some of the square footage. They were at 18 instead of 22. It is a revenue generator that covers the CAM charges, like Patrick said. It simplifies the project. So, and this was something that was not decided. So this is like the definition of compromising on this.
It's really not a compromise because it was never the original intent, Jesse, though.
But we're talking about
it was never the original intent of the project. No one was ever dreaming of buying the liquor store in the early part. Well, there wasn't shared with the former council of buying the liquor store.
The former town manager had it. If you want to go back and discuss with the seller of the property, the loading dock and the liquor store were in forever.
If you, I want to hear.
Maybe it flies away now, and maybe that's your compromise.
That is not, no, the liquor store was not, it was added on very late in the process in 2016.
It was.
That's my recollection.
Well, it was discussed as first right of refusal because they had a lease. Even when it was in a condominium side, we sat at a table and we discussed when it came up, when their lease came up, if we could purchase the rest of the building because our needs assessment left us short with not having enough space. So,
Laura, you know the October 17 vote didn't include the liquor store.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things.
Right.
The October 17th
The October
vote?
2017 vote did not include the liquor store, and then it was added on.
Yes, but that is not to say that I didn't sit at those meetings and request that.
But that was not contemplated by the bond. That was not contemplated by the discussions we had.
That is true.
Thank you.
That is true.
So let's get to the facts.
It was never in the project
so
is
again,
not true.
I want to get, if we can get somewhere here, but if we can't, then we can't. So what's the, is there a thoughts on that?
Well, I find myself agreeing with you, Matt. I think the liquor store can stand down. It's a revenue it generates revenue and pays the CAM charges. We also get an extra $22,000. I just want to address what Jill Law said about future costs. I had this chart. We haven't seen this one. This one was produced a year ago based on the numbers that everybody knows about. That $10.5 million comes from these numbers. The cost of the $5.8 million bond interest, that's approximate. The liquor store purchase and interest. Additional utility cost estimate for the new library space at the Belmont at $369. Loss of tax revenue was thrown in there. Okay, this is something you haven't seen. So, you know, Lori Kenyon vetted a lot of this. That's over $600,000, and camp charges for 20 years is $800,000. Now, keep in mind, if we grub out and clean up the old library and lease it out, which is very doable. I have at least 5 people I talk to who have great interest in leasing that space out. I have a laundry. I got two real estate offices. I got and 2 other retail spaces, outlets that have interest in renting that space, and 1 grocery store. So that 10.5 is everything thrown in, the kitchen sink and everything. You know, well, the liquor store does generate a little income, but for this is the worst case scenario that we've came up with. So it works out to 8 cents per thousand. Okay? Yeah, for a $400,000 house for the next 20 years, it's going to cost you $30, $32, $33 a year. That's the cost, Ricky. That's the cost.
You're right. It is the cost.
You know?
It is the cost, and it's on top of moving all the other projects forward.
Where's the $12 million for this building?
You guys, if it's going to
that.
degenerate, I'm going to close the work session.
What's degenerate?
If
I'm asking a question.
One person at a time.
Right. So, as I said, I'm for a library. I'm for doing something with a library. But I'm not going to not look at the rest of what we have to do in this town. We've been kicking the can down the road for years. And if you want the facts, just come to the town, and if you want to meet with our finance director, she'll give you the numbers. There's nothing hidden here. I told you, I'm going to bring you upfront facts. We need to do something with the library. That I'll tell you. Now, whether it's this project or another project, we're going to do something. But it's up to the taxpayers to say how much they want to spend and how much comes out of their pocket. Okay? Excuse me, out of order. 67% voted for a bond to do something. It wasn't stated that it was the Gilbane building. No council ratified that particular issue. Okay? No council did.
Yeah.
I looked for it.
It was advertised.
It was advertised, not ratified
The
by
council
a town
didn't
council.
approve that
according to the-
advertisement.
Well, the bond is only location specific. We can only bond out at that building. We can't say, well, let's go, buy something else and use that bond money. It is
Actually,
location specific.
That's not true. We can.
Well, that's what
it says.
that's
Purchase
what the
and
bond
renovate.
attorney told me.
I spoke to the bond attorney. It's purchase and renovate.
We can
Purchase and so you can use the. That's why the taxable bonds were used. Taxable bonds were used for the $400,000 for the Pier Liquor Store. Those were taxable bonds. Okay, that come from our discretionary borrowing, and the bond council said purchase and renovate. So that is not for existing site. If we did the existing site, we would have to use the discretionary borrowing. So that's the facts of the bond situation. But we can't. We could buy another site somewhere, and it's because it says purchase and renovate in the vote.
Sell the building to buy another building?
Whatever you want to do, Patrick. So here's the bottom line.
Jim, can you clarify, was that bond location specific in your understanding?
There's 2 points I have to correct. One, it's the intention of the town. The $2.8 million that would the library, the Belmont building, and the liquor store were purchased out of operating funds right now. We do intend, if it's not used for the library, to use a taxable bond to finance it. That's one of the options. The second thing was, in me speaking to the bond council, there was some confusion with Mr. Ferrara whether if we moved locations, if we could use that existing $5.8 million bond for any other location because of the way it was advertised.
Okay.
That's the way he
can't?
Cannot.
Cannot. So it's location specific.
According to Mr. Ferrara, what he stated to me, it was.
Thank you.
Jim, can I ask one more quick question? So if we don't put the library in the Belmont building, the town will issue a taxable bond to pay for that building, which would increase. So that would increase taxes and there wouldn't be a library?
I'll defer to Laura on that, but the quick answer is we have to pay for it somehow. And we had a meeting today because that $2.8 million came out of operating funds, out of a fund balance. It came from somewhere. So we would need to pay for it in some fashion. But if you want to get more specific, I'll get Laura and she can explain it.
So, can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
So let's move forward, all right? You want to move forward? Let's move forward. Watch this. 2.8 out of the taxpayer's checkbook. Now we're going to go and get the RFP. We select an RFP. Then we got to select an architect, and then they're going to come up with a price. Who's going to pay the architect? Who? Town checkbook. Again, we're going to keep dumping into the town checkbook until we get this project completed. And until we get it all to the point where we know what it cost, can we reach and get the bond money? So it's dump into the taxpayer's checkbook. Don't let anybody kid you. That's what it is. Now, in the meantime, you got to figure out, how do we run the town? That's what I'm trying to tell you. I'll sit here and run it, if whatever the taxpayers want. But how are you going to run the town? There are other expenses, okay? This is not an easy component, believe me. It's a lot easier when you run with private industry because they have investors, they come in and you purchase. This is not an easy one. We're using taxpayer money right now, okay? It would be great if we had $2 or $3 million sitting from the donors in an account. It would, but I can understand their position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura, sorry to...
All right, is there any...
I had a question. I want to clarify something here. In a municipal project such as this, don't most towns go into their reserve until they get, you know, fully funded later on when the bond comes in? And I mean, isn't this a normal process for municipalities for like roads and schools? And I mean, is this the norm?
If your question is about the 2.4 and or 2.8, depending on the size of the project, if there is a strong commitment to go forward with a project, then the bonds will reimburse the funds that have been taken out of reserve. If there is not a commitment for this project, then no, we would be using it out of reserve.
Understood. Now, say we needed to, all right, right now we're at 13% of the reserve. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if we needed, say, another $1 million, would that, you know, send the town into a financial tailspin, you know, for incidental just to get...
The 2.8 will bring us to our 10%.
Right. Oh, will bring us to our 10%. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
No, the 2.8 we already have.
If I take it out of my $9 million reserve, it brings us down to 6.2 on a $62 million budget. We're at 10%.
I thought we were at 16%. Last time I checked, we were at 16%.
Not with the fund balance, not on the general fund balance. The library has a fund balance. There are other funds that have fund balance, but on the general fund, it's at $9 million.
9. Okay, I thought you were at 16. I thought you were at 16%.
Total townwide.
Yeah.
That doesn't include. This isn't on townwide. It would be on general fund.
Right. Okay. All right. But could we use more money if we had to as a placeholder to get to the bonding? Get those bonds to market and keep this project moving forward? Is that out of the question?
I don't quite understand your question.
Can we? All right, we're right now we have 2.8.
We spent 2.8.
We spent 2.8. Now you got 9 million left, or it's 9 million minus
6.2 left.
Now 6.2. Okay. Now, could we float some more money to get this project started, kick-started, and get going? Like the architect. The architect.
I was wondering what it was getting.
Yeah, it's like, how much is that? I mean, is that something that we could do as a placeholder, and then once the bonds go to market, you guys get hold, right?
That is correct, if there is the
commitment.
True commitment to go forward with the project.
Okay. So it's the chicken and the egg. So.
Okay, before I weigh in on the liquor store project, which was the question, while Karen is here, she brought up a great point about the building committee. Patrick, you asked about the building committee, and we did also ask, we spoke about the building committee composition when we met with OLIS, and they do not have a requirement other than a librarian sit on the committee. They like to see equal size on both, but there is no requirement. I think that, I know for me at least, for this project, there has been a little bit of confusion with what is wanted and what is required. So that is a requirement, Karen, correct?
I'm sorry, Jill, the question is a requirement for?
So for the building committee, does OLIS have a requirement for the composition of that committee?
We do not have specific requirements for the composition of the committee. We do need to see that the project is aligned with the library's strategic plan and with the research, the library building consulting, the program that's been developed.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah, go ahead.
What is a strategic plan? What do you consider, what is
Every library in the state that applies for state grant and aid, we have two different types of grant and aid. We have operating grant and aid, which the town of Narragansett and every town in the state receives for operating costs for the library, and this particular program is our capital program of construction reimbursement. So, I'm sorry, what was the question? Yeah.
What do you mean by strategic plan?
Strategic plan, yes, thank you. So for the grant and aid, to qualify for the operating grant and aid, there are minimum standards for Rhode Island public libraries. One of those standards is that every single library has a strategic plan, a 3 to 5 year plan that outlines where the library is going, what they're doing with the resources. It's something that anybody who's in business is familiar with, having a strategic plan. What are our resources? What do we have to expend our resources on? So we require every library to do this. That is built at the local level to, again, get that community input to determine what the library does in the community. So, so we require that. Every library has to have an up-to-date strategic plan, and that's what reflects how the library operates and what sort of library building they built. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, but
sorry, it's been a long day.
It's kind of like my sense is it's the needs of the community. Like we have, you know, a population that kind of varies from year to year, you know, so we have children that come in, you know, like we have school children, and then we have the tourists that come in, and then the college students. So my sense is that the strategic plan has to go, we meet the needs of the community.
That's correct.
What they would like. And we also have an older population, and we have a younger population, so we need to meet the needs of both. I mean, is that?
That's correct. So when a library develops a strategic plan, they look at the demographics of the town, the needs, whether it's the needs of the students, the full range, you know, the full year residents of the town. And then, yes, you do have a large community that comes here. I know I come down to Narragansett in the summer. So those people, so the library comes up with a plan to accommodate. How do you serve those residents that just come in through the summer months? Now, something was mentioned earlier in Laurie's presentation about if the library doesn't meet standards. If the library doesn't meet standards, they don't receive the state grant and aid. Now, one of the ways the libraries mentioned the worst case scenario, the library closing. Now, the library is a member. We require all public libraries to be members of Ocean State Libraries. That's a consortium that allows you to go to any library in the state and borrow books or have the library order them for you from any library, including the academic libraries, Brown University or Bryant College or Salve Regina University. But that infrastructure of libraries, that interconnectedness allows you to have tremendous services, the services of all Rhode Island libraries available through your local community library. But at the same time, your local library needs to meet the standards that every other library in the state meets.
And then also, Rick Lima at the end, he mentioned how meeting the needs of the town, and you need to, you know, we have a school department, fire department, police department. Now, does the library, I mean, are there any guidelines from the state, like, that you, if they meet those needs, that they meet the needs of the library? Does that question make sense to you?
I can only speak for libraries. I can't speak
Oh, no, but I meant though, is there, basically, I was under the impression that if a town gets funding from the state for the police, fire, and school department, they had to also give money to a library? I'm wrong on that?
There's no such requirement in terms of that. The state gives money for education, but I don't know about police or fire.
Karen, I just want to clarify. So if eventually Narragansett stops receiving the waiver, or the multiple waivers that they're getting right now for ADA and other violations, is it true that if you live in Narragansett, you would not be able to use any libraries outside of Narragansett? Is that correct? Because you would be in the system?
That depends on whether the library also stops being a member of Ocean State Libraries. Ocean State Libraries is a reciprocal agreement between all communities in the state. So we require libraries to belong to Ocean State Libraries if they want to receive state aid. If you don't want to receive state aid, you can do whatever you want. But if they are not a member, then the Narragansett Library card would only be good in the town of Narragansett. You wouldn't be able to go into any other community, and you would not be able to use any of the resources. You wouldn't be able to get books delivered to you from other libraries in the state. So you would only be able to use your local library.
So, but are the waivers related to possibly losing that membership?
The Ocean State Libraries is separate from us. They are a separate 501c3,
okay.
So they have their own requirements.
Okay.
Generally, when that happened in Central Falls, when Central Falls went bankrupt, they could not belong to the consortium anymore. So those residents of Central Falls could not use any other library, although the city of Pawtucket very graciously allowed them to come and use the Pawtucket Library. But that's an agreement that's met by the libraries in the state, and that's not ruled by our office.
Okay. Thank you.
So Karen, so as long as that fee is paid, I can go to any library in the state.
With Ocean State Libraries, you can go to any library in the state if the fee to Ocean State Libraries is paid. If the library does not meet standards, our standards, you cannot get library books delivered to your library from any other library in the state. And there are other benefits of meeting the public library requirements and qualifying for the state aid. I'm not exactly sure how much money the town of Narragansett gets annually in state aid. Patty, you might know that. $187,000 annually from the state of Rhode Island to cover operating costs. So that's close to 25% of the cost of operating the library in the town of Narragansett. So that is what gets lost if you do not meet the minimum standards for public libraries.
Does that go by square footage?
All right. Yes, Karen.
I don't know who can answer this question, but isn't it the affirmative obligation of the town, since the voters voted on the bonds to expand the library, isn't it the affirmative obligation of the town to make sure that project goes forward?
In no way describe that if there's an authorization to borrow up to a certain amount, and then there's a decision that the council has to make with weighing all the things that are going on in the town. So that's, yeah.
Was it the voters voted for it?
Which they vote for every bond, yes. So
And they
not,
voted 2/3.
So, right.
Where is the follow-through on the part of the town? Don't you have an affirmative obligation to continue through with that vote?
No, the obligation is to the entire taxpayers to borrow up to that amount, and then that decision is made by the council.
Okay, how about question?
So, you have a question for who?
The audience, let them ask some questions. I'm all done. As far as I can go.
I think we have the agenda item on for the next meeting on the 22nd. Everyone's welcome to come and weigh in at that time. I think we're going to call the work session to a close, and we're going to go from there. Thank you, everybody.